going to be changing the AC compressor in our 2013 528i. So here's the replacement compressor that we're going to be using. The magnetic clutch on my compressor failed, so the compressor internally is fine, but it's just easier to replace the whole compressor than to change the clutch for me. It's sideways, and it's got 2 bolts. So that's the only thing holding in the compressor, other than the belt and an electrical connection and 2 line connections. And I'll show you where the compressor is at here. It's this right here. It's actually pretty easy to get to, and the belt is super easy to get to. So here's the general game plan. We get rid of this bar, we get rid of this airbox assembly, we remove this tubing and just set it to the side. We take those 2 lines out and obviously vacuum out the contents of the AC before the Freon beforehand. And then we disconnect the electrical connection. Once all that's off, we take off the 2 bolts that hold it onto the engine block, and we're able to remove it and then replace it. So we'll get these 2 bolts. This bar will just lift away, and then we're gonna open up these little tabs, and we're gonna be able to move the airbox out of the way. I'm gonna loosen this hose clamp, and I'm gonna take this connector off, and we're gonna be able to move all of this assembly to the side. We don't need to touch this. After that, you get a 16mm breaker bar on this tensioner, rotate it clockwise, and take the belt off. Next thing to do is going to be to remove this bracket. It looks like an Allen head, so we can have some room to play with. There's a bracket, it extends out back here. It'll make it hard for the AC compressor to come out and to be able to move the lines. These are metal lines, but they're flexible up here. So once that bracket's out of the question and this is disconnected from the compressor, we can move them around a lot more. And once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect these lines, and which take a T30. And then once the lines are out of the way, I'm going to disconnect that electrical connection, and then I'll show you how to get those bolts. Like I said, once you disconnect these 2 hard lines, they become very flexible, and then you can push them up and out of the way. You pull back on this tab right here, and you can unplug the electrical connection. All right, so we got this bottom bolt to get to, which is the e-torque, and then this bolt behind this thing to get to. So that's going to be a problem. So 2 solutions. One thing, you get somebody on a breaker bar here, twist it forward, and then get that. I don't have a second pair of hands, so I'm going to remove 1, 2, and 3, and just take the whole tensioner off, and that way I'll have access to those bolts, and I'll be able to show you better. All E10 bolts. These are E12s. So you got 1 up top, 1 right there at the bottom. I'm gonna take them both out. The bolts are off. It should be fairly easy to take this off, but it might need a little bit of a hit from a hammer, because the bracket that goes on, this one right here, it can kind of squeeze and not let it come out. So I'm gonna give it some love taps with a rubber mallet. You might be catching on this. So I've disconnected this connector, I've disconnected this hose, and I'm gonna pull up on this thing and take this hose off, and push this hose to the side and see if it'll come out with that. Because I've hit it with the hammer and I've gotten it to move a little bit, but it still won't come off the block. Clip that goes here on the bottom of the intercooler, you have to take that clip off, and then you can take this whole hose to the side. And let's take a look at the compressor now. Still fairly stuck, but we've got a little bit more room to work with. I'm gonna just keep on hitting it with the hammer and get it unstuck, get it to budge. And what I ended up doing was this bottom cooler right here. That's why it's so shiny, is I put an air hammer right there and I hammered it till it was able to vibrate out of the way. So as you can see, they can get stuck on there, and if it's stuck, it's because of this thing, this bottom part that sticks out. You see how this is pushed out some? What I ended up doing was putting the screw here, threading it in, and then I hit this end with the hammer, and that pushed this out. So now it should fit. and it fits. So now you can see the bolt holes. They fit. Just put the bolt through them. Once you have it mounted in there, get some refrigerant oil. I think it takes like 4 ounces, and put it in there. Now, if you bought a new compressor, it probably came with refrigerant oil pre-filled. And when I say put it in there, you can put it into this big hole, and then you can spin the compressor, and it'll suck it up into the inside. Things on. There's 2 more things that need to go on at this point. The 3 bolts right here. Put the belt tensioner back on, and then put your hose back on. So I'm just gonna slide it through and feed it in. Anyway, you get the idea. I'll slide it through, feed it in, connect it there, connect it at the bottom, reconnect the electrical connection here, and reconnect this hose right over here. And then what we'll do is I'll snake these, go underneath this coolant tube, and you should change the seals on these if you haven't. You can get them from BMW. I wouldn't trust aftermarket seals. Put the 2 bolts through the correct spots. And then we will also reconnect the electrical connection right there. And then this bracket that we initially took out, which goes on right here on the compressor. See the bolt right there? And that bracket will help us hold these 2 tubes. It holds them together. Once you do all that, then we'll refill the compressor with Freon. Reverse order. We're gonna put the belt back on, and then we're gonna put this hose on there, and then we're gonna put the air box on that hose and attach it here after we put our new filter back in. And then we have our AC gauge hooked up to the cold side, and I'm gonna hook it up to the Freon, and I'm gonna turn it on. I'm gonna pre-fill the system. Actually, before I even put the Freon in, I'm gonna vacuum out the system. Once I'm done vacuuming the system, I'm gonna hook it up to the Freon and pre-fill the system. And once I pre-fill the system, I can turn the car on, turn the AC compressor on, and then continue to fill it till it's full. You have a sign here that shows you how much R134A it takes. So this one takes 1.87 pounds. So what you do is you weigh your Freon can. If you're using the small cans, they'll have the weight on it. If you're using the big ones like I do, I put it on a scale, and then I run it in. And then when it loses 1.87 pounds, I know I put in the correct system. It's not on pressures, it's based on weight.